Welcome to this episode of the Nurse Coach Duo. As nurse coaches, we guide women through the physical and emotional shifts of perimenopause and menopause. But thriving in midlife isn't something we do alone. Today, we're joined by our husbands to candidly explore communication, partnership, and the tools that have supported our journeys through this transition. Our hope is that this conversation helps you feel seen, supported, and better equipped to navigate midlife with the people who you love. And we know that men need to be more involved in this conversation. And so this is our start. So shoot us questions. Let us know what you think. We'll have them on again. And we appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Before we dive in, just a quick reminder. This episode is for educational purposes only and isn't medical advice. If you're dealing with a health issue, please check in with your healthcare provider. Hi, welcome to the Nurse Coach Duo. I'm Jen Schroer, owner of Clarity Health and Wellness, and I have my husband Hans with me here today.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Angie McGuire from Coach Angie in Oak Park, Illinois. I have my husband Jerry with me today.
Hi.
And today on the Nurse Coach Duo, we are so excited to have our life partners with us and here to talk with us about menopause, as we do on all of our episodes. But as our listeners know, that we have throughout the last year since we have been doing the Nurse Coach Duo, we brought different experts, wellness experts that work with women in midlife to the show. And we have been talking about having our partners on the show for a long time. And it's finally, here we are today. And we're so excited to talk about men and menopause. And so we have lots to cover. And we'll probably have to do this again because there's going to be so much to talk about. But I do want to say that this episode is going to look a little different, that we're going to ask some questions. They may be asking questions, trying to do it as organically as we can today, because we know, every relationship is different during menopause and it can show up in a lot of different ways. So, or affect different people in different ways, of course. So I think one of the first questions, and I'll send it over to Hans, and just, since Jen, starting to work with women in midlife, how has it changed your views, or like even when you're talking to your friends out in the community, or you're, how has your conversations changed around menopause?
Well, I mean, probably mainly, I don't think prior to this, menopause was even a topic that would come up, or if we were talking about things that maybe were around menopause, my friends and I wouldn't really know that there was a connection there. The issues would stand apart from the menopause thing, so we would have maybe been talking about interactions that someone had with their spouse, or even arguments or disagreements, or any number of different things, and we wouldn't have made the connection that was possibly or probably why they were going through those things. So I think overall just has made me more aware that there's sometimes something bigger going on and you don't always understand it. Now it's been, this time since Jen's been doing this that I certainly am no expert, but I feel like I've got some foundation of understanding to maybe step back and think, okay, what's happening isn't because the person is crazy or going through something terrible. That's just a natural thing that's happening, and it has a different effect on different people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and the changes that, like Angie, like you were saying, like every woman goes through it differently too. So it's not, like, that's why I think it's hard for people too, to know whether do I attribute it to that or what is it, because what I go through and what his friends go through could be so different. Same with you and I, right? Like we've talked about our experiences and they've been very different. So, Jerry, I know that, Angie is in a different phase, a little bit of life, a couple of years ahead of me and you guys have gone through a little bit more of this than I have. But I also know that she wasn't kind of doing this menopausal coaching at the time. So maybe you guys didn't really know that she was going through anything. Did you notice changes or have an idea of what was happening with Angie?
I think it's sort of, with everything else that's going on in life, right? You have a lot of other pressure, you have work, you have kids, you have all sorts of other, your community. And so I think there's a lot of things going on. So I think that sort of menopause menopause, I think similar to Hans, I have a much better sort of understanding of it before. I think probably prior to Angie going through it or prior to the coaching, it was one of those things that was like 50 years away that you didn't have to worry about or think about, right? And I think it's probably also like a lot of things where we just didn't talk about these things, right? We didn't talk about menopause, we don't talk about mental health, we don't talk about challenges of midlife. I just think societally we don't talk about a lot of these things, whereas actually be really helpful to talk about them, because then you can prepare yourself like as a couple for what it is and maybe have a bit more understanding. As Hannah said, you step back and actually maybe be a bit more considerate rather than getting in a fight about something without thinking that, maybe there's some underlying things here that you just don't understand that are biological. So I think, looking back on it, it would have been helpful to have that understanding. And as you mentioned, Jen, about how individual it is. I mean, that's the other thing, is you can't say definitively to someone, well, your wife's going to go through menopause and these 5 things are going to happen in this order, right? It varies so much. So I think that having a general knowledge of it, that there is this change is going to happen. It's got a really long potential timeline. The impacts can vary greatly. At least then you're sort of prepared for that and can kind of, give it some consideration.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Where do you think men are getting their information? Or, I mean, if they're not talking to their partners, where do you think they're getting their information?
I'm just not sure that, and I think, again, guys and gals are very different, right? I think that are guys talking about these things maybe on very specific issues as it relates to them, but guys don't talk about a lot of things that affect them either, right? I just think we're particularly bad at kind of like, talking about these things. And I don't know how you feel, Hans, but like I've noticed in the last sort of 5 years, people like my age beginning to say things like, oh, I've been struggling with, like, oh, I've been to see it. They're like guys who I've known for a long time. I feel like some of them have said that, and it's kind of like it's actually been quite encouraging to like, that's actually good, because life is hard and there are times when life's not great, and it's good to acknowledge that rather than sometimes you just get together and everyone pretends everything is fine. And they all have challenges. So I think it's refreshing that we are maybe talking about these things more, and these subjects aren't taboo or they can't be discussed. I think more of that, the better for everyone.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think in the past there was much of discussion about it in general. I think it's sometimes, speaking to men's mental health, I think sometimes men are of the opinion that discussing those things is a sign of some sort of a weakness, or you're not man enough to cope with things, or any of those sort of old tropes. And it's just, I think I would say that's probably something I agree with in terms of the last few years, men being capable of talking these things through, and if not with their friends, maybe with their spouse or with a therapist or something like that, and it's maybe opening up some things there. I would also think there's an element of, when discussing someone's wife, of saying, well, there's not a lot of topics I wouldn't discuss with my closest friends, but there's a privacy sense of, not oversharing any sort of women's issues. I mean, guys aren't going to talk about those things, cycles and so forth anyway, but that's sort of adjacent to all that. So it's still sort of a private feminine thing that, wouldn't be for most polite society conversations, maybe.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that doesn't happen in this house. That's all we talk about. Well, that's all I talk about. So yeah, it's definitely, I think, these two have a little bit of a different perspective than most men, but that's part of why we wanted to have you guys on, because we want men to understand that they can talk to us about it, and I know that one of the reasons you feel comfortable talking about it is because I talk about it so much. But that's also the other side of it, right? We want to encourage women to talk to their spouses about it more. I actually had a client say to me, come to me the other day and say, oh my gosh, I had such a hard day, and I didn't want him to talk to me. I didn't want this, I didn't want that. She was just, and I never get like that. I don't know what was happening. And so I kind of explained to her, what her hormones might be doing if that was the cause. And I said, this is where you really have to communicate. Like, communication is so, so important in this phase. And especially when you start to, right now, everybody's talking about it and we know what's happening, like we kind of know more what's happening. So, but I liked your question, Angie. So I wanted to ask him as well, because I do think that women, we're seeing it everywhere about menopause. I don't know. Are you guys seeing that? Like, I know he reads the news constantly and, watches sports and does that kind of stuff. Like, does some of that filter into, or the podcasts you're listening to filter in?
I've started to see a little bit more about it. In particular, they've talked recently about the taking the black box warning off of the hormones and things like this. I think you guys are kind of on the forefront in both in your practice and women as a whole of like these things becoming more known, talked about. Even like when I talk to anybody about this, and I mentioned things that I've picked up from Jen in terms of the fact that the studies have only been done on men, not women. Like, how do you study women's issues with men's subjects? So it's just a completely, boggled approach to science in general, but this issue in particular. So things like that are starting to become known and people are talking about them. Now, maybe it's not on every newspaper headline, but it's out there. The conversation's being had. And I think this is like the next wave of healthcare awareness, I think, in a lot of ways. Because in the past, it was probably just chalked up to, the broad is crazy, she's just
whiny women is what they
it's
call
a
it.
time of the month. That's
that's something.
That's always been like,
it's like an automatic write-off for anything.
Yeah.
No, I think that's all very true. I think that I haven't seen it in any podcasts I listen to, but I have seen the podcasts. I listen to political podcasts mainly, and what I have seen creeping into a lot of those is sort of loneliness and male loneliness, and kind of particularly like younger generations' lack of connectivity.
Yeah.
And I think that like potentially with what you're doing, I think that there is a male audience, and a male audience that doesn't have someone, a wife that they can talk to about, or not comfortable talking about it, but probably has questions, and maybe they don't have someone they can talk to about it. And I think there's probably a world where that could actually be really advantageous for guys to have someone independently to talk to and say, hey, my wife's going through X, Y, and Z, and I think it's related to menopause. How should I approach it? Because again, it's we're not all living in households where we're wearing pink and talking about all the latest FDA conclusions and definitions. So it's I think recognizing that, and again, I think that a lot of men are fairly isolated. So maybe having an opportunity to share with them would be something that would be a market you don't necessarily think about to tap into, but there's probably there's probably a real need for education there as well, because even I feel like even having been exposed to it, it would be better if I could have 15 years ago and said, hey, here's what's going to happen, here are sorts of things, so that you can grow about it, so you can grow together, so it doesn't make you like doesn't have to test your relationship in ways, so you understand, so that you can make those adjustments, so so you're still intimate, and there's still all those parts of your relationship survive this whole process, right? And that's really what you want, because obviously so many of these life changes do put pressure on marriages, and a lot of marriages don't survive. So having the tools and the education prior to these things, I think, would help a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking today about how, actually Dr. Lisa Moschini has, made the 3 Ps for women, and she sort of concluded that, the 3 Ps are puberty, pregnancy, or postpartum, and perimenopause are women's most vulnerable times of their lives with hormonal fluctuation. And I feel like men or partners get education, maybe not around puberty, because you guys are going through puberty at the same time, but like maybe, I mean, certainly more education in as youth, as, could be in the schools, it could be even, and I think the next generation will have more because we're talking about it more, right? And it's out there. And then certainly during pregnancy and postpartum, there's classes that men come to, partners come to, and you learn and you go through that together. And then, we teach men to watch their wives postpartum for postpartum depression. And they're often the ones that will call the provider and say, my wife is really struggling. Can we help? Can we come in together? And I feel like that can also apply to this perimenopausal stage. And certainly not every woman goes through and has, severe mood, fluctuations or, but certainly they do, right? And I feel like the more we talk about it, the more education we can, and communication too, right? It could be something that I hope starts to be integrated into routine care, right? And that will happen because I think women are going to walk into their appointments and they're going to fill out, surveys or whatever about how they're feeling, and how great it would be to bring your partner with you, and even bring your partner with you when you're talking about hormone replacement therapy, if that's what if that's your goal and that's what you want to do, to help them understand why are you doing that? What do or why are you working out 5 times a day? Like why, whatever, all those things that help us sort of transition into menopause a little easier. So I hope it starts earlier in your life and we get more moving forward. And I also wanted to, sort of get into the next question, but I think back in the day, still menopause was sort of like this dirty word, right? It was like, oh God, when you get to menopause, everything ends, right? And I feel I am in menopause. I have been in menopause now for 6 months. And I guess, and I wanted to ask Jerry, like, if you have sort of seen any difference in me, maybe since I started hormones, but also as I've sort of, into this next chapter, if you will, have you seen any changes in me?
I think certainly the hormone therapy was profoundly impactful in terms of, just you feeling better about yourself and just feeling more even keeled. And I think that was huge. And I think probably because of that, actually going into the menopause phase, I don't really feel has been particularly different. Like I haven't really noticed anything about it or thought anything is particularly different. But I think certainly the hormone therapy was a big game changer.
And just to be clear to listeners, I started hormone therapy 12 months prior to menopause. So I did in that late perimenopausal phase, and that was really where I was having like not severe, but moderate mood fluctuations. And I needed some stability there. So that was my decision. And fortunately, I had a provider that worked with me. And fortunately, more and more providers are talking about hormones in perimenopause versus having to wait till you're in menopause, which is not what you should be told. I want to scream that from the mountaintop. But anyway, so I just think I wanted to say too, Jerry and I have, getting used to empty. There's a lot that happens. Jerry already says like in this stage, right? And it can be very confusing to people and relationships, but communication. But so Hans, how about you in the same light? I know, Jen and I, we've already referred to this, but we're in sort of different in this menopause transition, because again, this is a transition. This doesn't happen overnight. Perimenopause can be 7 to 10 years, average of 4.
I survived. There's hope.
Good to know. Good to know you can survive it.
Thanks a lot. But I mean, what is some of the things that you've seen, Jen? And I know she's so smart, and I've learned so much about my cycle. And like, I didn't know as much as I want. Years ago when I was cycling, I know more about it now, which is bizarre, but again, this is why we're here, is to get out education and coach people. But what would you say about Jen as she's sort of moving through this, and what have you found has been helpful, um, and I mean, yes, your support, but other than that, would you say?
Yeah, so I mean, watching Jen go through it has been, an interesting process because she's been approaching it very scientifically, very medically, like I would expect her to as a nurse to go through that process and go, okay, what's happening to me? I want to find out why, not just what's happening, but why it's happening, and trying to get to some of the root causes with either supplements or different approaches to health. So it's been very interesting to watch that evolve because she's been not just allowing herself to be sort of shoved around by menopause or perimenopause or whatever stage she's in, um, as just sort of a bystander. She's taking charge of things and trying to affect her health in different ways, to be part of that. And I think from my standpoint, I think men are naturally, a lot of us anyway, fixers. We want to be able the guy who comes in and repairs things. And part of the humbling process of this is realizing we can't. But along those same lines, we can also maybe not fix, but we can keep from making it worse. So, by either learning to stay out of the way or be sympathetic or keep our mouth shut at the right time or whatever, to be part of the process and to not take some of these things personally. Like if she's having a bad day, it's, I think, a natural instinct for a man or a woman, if it's their spouse, to take that onto themselves. He or she is upset, so I must have done something to make them that way. And that's probably part ego too. But so if we didn't cause it, we certainly can't fix it. So sometimes just understanding that's things are out of our control, do the things we can do. So that comes back to trying to be maybe more supportive around the house or doing some of the things that we know annoy the other person, saying, okay, I'm not going to leave my socks out or my refrigerator open or whatever. To not, if you can't be part of the solution, at least don't be part of the problem. And kind of take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, Hans has been, I'll say this about like, just been so great to kind of just roll with it. Like I have changed a lot. I mean, like, and over the last couple of years, probably more than even before, as you get closer to menopause, more things change. I've started hormone therapy as well. But like, I mean, I really don't drink at all anymore because I can't. And that was one of the things that we did together. Like we would share a bottle of wine and we would, I mean, I'll have a glass whenever we go out to dinner or something like that. We would do all these DIYs and work in the yard together and everything. And some days I just want to lay on the couch and do nothing. And that is not who I used to be. So I will say that like just the fact that I've had to learn acceptance for who I've become, the fact that I'm lucky enough that he has been accepting that person as well, because you see, this is a time where a lot of people get divorced and relationships fall apart and they're because you hope to grow together, right? And when one person changes so dramatically from who we used to be, like I'm willing to accept myself. I'm just also lucky that he's willing to accept the new me as well. I mean, I am still me too. I'm still me, but there is a lot that has changed. So yeah, I think that when, obviously we're asking the men like what, how are you supporting? But from a woman's perspective, the best thing you can do is just allow us to figure out who we are becoming and allow us to have a bad day and allow us to have the next day be like the same thing you did yesterday that made us mad doesn't make us mad at all today. Like, sometimes it's gonna be like that. So, yeah, I think it's been hard in that respect, but it's been so nice to just, be accepted for who you are, which is great.
And that's growth right there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the beauty of growing together and having,
Yeah.
support. Right?
So Andrew and I have asked a lot of questions. Do you guys have any for us? Anything that, whether it's for yourself or what you think your friends want to know or what you think men need to know? It doesn't have to be specifically a question of yours, but do you have any?
I'm gonna jump to one I came up with later in the conversation, but we've been having a lot of talk about the conversation. Are there ways that, in your experience, you've seen that can be more effective for starting the conversation? Because that's a tricky thing to approach. A man may not know that that's what's going on. Even if he's aware of menopause, he may not know that that's where the woman is. And it's also could be a landmine to step on if you're making assumptions or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah. I'll go first, and I'll let you say what you think too, because obviously everybody's different. I do think that if you lead with hormones, menopause, period, any of these things, you're running into the wrong lane, right? You're just going to run, that's going to cause a problem. I think that it really has to be kid gloves, and it has to be, hey, I want to talk to you about some things I've been noticing. You don't seem like yourself. You don't seem to be feeling well. Is there something going on? Allow them to open up and start saying, I think I'm going through perimenopause or menopause, instead of identifying the problem and telling them the solution, right? Or saying, or naming it. I think a lot of women are bothered by going through it. It means they can't have kids anymore. It means they're getting older. All these things to them, that's how they take it on. That I think that you really have to approach it as an open conversation of allowing them to come and say what's happening. And obviously you don't wait until they're doing so horribly that we need to intervene medically or anything like that, right? Or therapeutically. And if you start to get deeper into it, it might have to be a more aggressive, more assertive, I guess, a conversation. But to start it out, I would say probably it's more, I've been noticing these changes, and hey, can we talk about this? I don't know, Angie, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, right. All of that. And I think, Jen, you've already said it, but one of the most common complaints for women, certainly in perimenopause, and just for our listeners, and if there's a guy out there that's been sent this this interview and from a friend or your wife or your partner to have a listen, I hope there's going to be a lot of those sharing going on, because we got to start this conversation. But just knowing that, if you're 45 to 55 years old as a woman, you're going through it. And, 55 is on the latter end of actually getting to menopause, right? And we know, we've mentioned these numbers already, can be over 7 to 10 years. And sorry, back to this most common complaint is you hear women just don't feel like themselves. They can't pinpoint it. They may have, back in the day, all people talked about was a hot flash. Ooh, women are hot flashing, or in the UK, it's hot flushing. Mm-hmm. It's, and that's, there's just some jokes around that. This is not a joke. And we know that hot flashes are not healthy, and there's help out there around hot flashes, but this common complaint of not feeling like themselves. But then I also wanted just to also throw a great resource for all genders is the North American, or the Menopause Society, right? They have, there's so many resources, but this is very backed by science, but there's articles, there's information. It's, people have varying views about some of that information, but it's a great resource. It's a website that you can go to that's specifically out there for, studies around menopause, and certainly papers. You can access papers. And you know what? There's nothing sexier about entering a conversation of like, hey, I read this today, and I realized this could be happening to you. Tell me about what's going on. Like, do some research, like get into the conversation, make this a shared conversation, and don't run from it. Make it a great time of life. If we're so lucky to get here, we should be celebrating it. And we need help along the way in a lot of other times of life. And now we just need some little extra something right now. But, do your research, and, seek out help, go to your provider and ask questions.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I guess that's what I would say, Hans.
Okay, thank you.
How about you, Jerry? Do you have any questions for us?
I think one of the things that I would sort of think would be good to, obviously it's later, it's past the point for me, but I think there's also a lot of or lack of clarity or understanding of when this potentially can start, right? Like when does perimenopause, when does it have the potential to start? And I think that, again, I think most people, men in particular, think menopause is something when a woman's like, 75 years old. And I think that the fact that it can start and does start much earlier, and the duration of it and kind of what potentially happens during that time, I think that's really kind of very, I just don't know if there's a lot of understanding around that. I don't think a lot of people, guys, even know it. We think, oh, it's just something that just happens, and it's something,
Right.
We've got menopause week and then we're back to normal. I think maybe the other thing I would say is that we've always talked to each other about things. It's like, how do you guide men who aren't comfortable talking about these types of issues? Because there's a lot of guys out there that are not gonna want to brace this issue, but they want to be in a happy marriage, and they want to, or they're just uncomfortable with it. So I think maybe sort of using some examples, or how would you give it to some, or instruct a guy who's really doesn't know how to approach his partner about it, doesn't have, really lacks information. Again, that's why I think there's some real potential in this space for what you both do. Is that I just think there's probably a lot of people out there that wouldn't ask any questions, but they probably need to know that it's important that they do. So maybe thinking about those people and how you would guide them.
Yeah.
We've asked
real
like
life
4
example.
questions.
All right,
Go.
sorry.
I was just saying, a real life example of that was a good friend of mine who was having concerns that his wife didn't find him attractive anymore because her
Right.
sex drive had at least temporarily dropped. And he was internalizing all that, and it was making, for some resentment, I think, and some hurt feelings.
Mhm.
And he finally did have these conversations, and now he realizes that it wasn't about him at all. So it's very helpful and useful.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, Hans, I don't have the stats on that, but that is so common.
Yeah.
And, women's libido declines. It's very, very real, but there's help out there. And there's medication if you decide to go that route, finally.
Yeah.
Jen, what would you say to some of Jerry had a few questions there, but as far as I would be interested to see what you'd like to say.
Well, I mean, so back to like, when does it start? So my big thing for women is to start tracking your cycle as early as you can. I mean, I would love teenagers to start it, because then you're going to start to notice when it's happening. The way I typically talk to women about, like what's happening is when things that used to work stop working, your brain, the exercise you did, the diet you had, all of these different things, all these, you start to notice these things that are starting to change. You may be going through it. Start to pay attention how you're feeling. When men start to notice that, they may be, a lot of times it's the people around you that notice it. Traditionally, menopause is 51, 52, right? So you take 10 years back from that. So we're saying 40, but we definitely see women in their 30s starting to experience it, But I typically say to people, if you're 40, you're in perimenopause, right? Like whether you're experiencing symptoms or not, you're in it. You may not realize you're experiencing it. I know for a long time, I thought I was just crabby. I'm like, I guess this is just me. I guess I'm just crabby, Like I didn't even realize what was going on until I started kind of learning a lot of this. But, when you start to notice these things that just aren't working the same, or you start to hear, like you have to be a little self-aware, right? You start to hear, you don't seem like yourself. You're not acting like yourself. You haven't gone to the gym in a long time. You used to go every day. These kind of things, these could be hints that something was going on. So yes, 10 years is a long time. Typically what happens in the beginning is these tiny little small changes. And then as they get closer, it's harder. Like Angie mentioned that it got harder for her mentally. The same is happening to me. I was able to manage everything with exercise, diet, supplements, all these different things. And now I can't. And so I got on hormones. So there is definitely this, beginning phase of this kind of chaos. You don't really know what you're getting, and then it gets more loud. Let's say that it gets louder at the end, and you really know you're going through it. So I don't know, was there
Loud
another question
meaning
you were?
loud meaning hormonal, like severe hormonal
like the
fluctuations.
symptoms get louder
Yeah.
to where you
Yeah.
can't ignore them anymore is what I mean. We always like to end with one piece of advice. So if you guys have one piece of advice, it can be for us women going through it, or it can be for the other men out there that you have for just this kind of midlife menopausal time frame, and what you would recommend.
Yeah, I would say to the guys, be willing to listen, not try to fix the problem if you can. And yeah, I think that's really it. Just be able to listen and try to be understanding and step outside yourself a little bit and realize it's not about you necessarily, and try to be understanding about it all.
Yeah, I think also just not to sort of dread or fear it. It's not like, I mean, and not obviously we don't go through it, but like as your relationship, I mean, it's a time that you can actually improve your relationship, right? Because you're providing more support and you're paying attention and you have concerns. So, it's an opportunity to strengthen your relationship as well. You just got to put the work in.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being part of our nurse coach duo and our lives, and supporting us through this interesting time in our lives. Angie and I both have our own businesses and companies, and we are absolutely happy to talk with men and help them understand this and how they can support women. So just reach out to us. We both have free discovery calls and would be happy to talk with men or women, obviously, but it is not exclusive to only have that conversation with the women. So if you like this episode, please be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.